Jeff Olenek, and I lead Wipfli's cybersecurity advisory practice. Today, we'll explore how cybersecurity strategy drives business resilience, protects your organization's reputation and assets, and ultimately the trust of those that you serve. As C-level leaders, your role in managing cyber risk is more critical than ever. The rise of ransomware and sophisticated AI-driven attacks, combined with the recent reductions in critical infrastructure protection due to the government shutdown, make executive vigilance essential for making your companies resilient to cyber threats. Our distinguished panelists from a range of industries will share actionable insights to help you align cybersecurity priorities with your strategic business goals. October is National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. It's a perfect time to assess your organization's readiness and set priorities for the coming year. We encourage you to engage, ask questions, and share insights through the Q&A, as we will discuss what it means to be truly cyber ready and risk smart at the executive level. My partner, Tom Oginski, will be moderating the Q&A. We'll be asking questions along the way. So let's start by having the panelists introduce themselves. Amy, could you start and also share briefly why cybersecurity is important to you?
Yes, I am Amy J. I'm the Risk Administration Officer for Adams Bank and Trust. And basically, cybersecurity is critical to help the bank protect customer data, financial assets, and ensuring operational continuity. The banking industry has several regulations and requirements that must be met with timely transactions, notifications, and financial disbursements. So we must maintain good cyber hygiene to ensure we can continue operations and safeguard financials.
Terrific. Megan, how about over to you?
Thanks, Jeff. I'm Megan Peck. I am the Director of the Health Center Controlled Network at the Community Health Center Association of Connecticut. We are the state primary care association that supports all federally qualified community health centers in the state. Our HCCN supports 20 of them across Connecticut and Rhode Island, serving over 700,000 patients. Cybersecurity is really important to me because these organizations sit at the intersection of health equity and technology. Protecting their systems means protecting the data, privacy, and trust of some of the most vulnerable patients in our communities.
Thanks, Megan. Lori, over to you.
Thanks, Jeff. Good morning, everyone. My name is Laurie Pinella. I am the Chief Information Officer at Marquette University. My responsibility as CIO is to ensure the availability and the integrity of the systems that support Marquette's operations. I'm also very passionate about protecting the institutional reputation of Marquette if there were such a cyber incident on campus, and thinking about the trust that our faculty, staff, students, and families put into in me, my team, and the university to protect their data and to ensure that it's secure. Also, with cyber incidents, the legal and financial risk is also a priority for me, that if we were to have a cyber breach, we must comply with federal regulations like HIPAA, procedures for criminal information systems, FERPA for our students, and the risk of exposure is something that keeps me up at night. So the cyber security and the posture of our organization is very important to me.
All right, thanks, Lori. Dr. Bodner, over to you.
Thanks, Jeff. Just to get it out of the way, I'm probably the only rocket scientist on the call today, so forgive my background. It's an asteroid colony. I am the president and CIO of AWC Technology, which is a company that's part of a family office in construction in Chicago, 47-year-old business with a number of companies, and I have been brought in to manage the transition from legacy systems into a new space, which is an AI front information-based system I talk about us moving from being a construction company that had technology to a technology company that happens to be doing construction. And the landscape of cybersecurity is probably the most scary thing I've ever seen, next to the landscape that I see from AI. So my focus has been to figure out how to make all of this information accessible and useful to agents and AI, assistants, while protecting us. And it's not rocket science, but it's getting pretty close.
Well, I'm sure that I'm really looking forward to hearing your insights on that. And it's great that we have such a diverse panel from different industries, because it is going to be taking a look at a different lens. So let's start off with a question for all of you. If you can share, what are the most common cybersecurity threats facing your industry, and how do you protect against them? Why don't we start off with Michael? Why don't you start off on the construction side? What are the most common threats?
Okay, so the legacy ones, the historical ones, are the need for the security of the data, the little information, the build documents, the nature of the financial movements, the actual payment to vendors. All of that has been handled for years by the traditional systems. The risk that we see now is, as we throw out the legacy architecture and move in to an information first architecture, we're having to face the changes in the topology of the landscape. And I don't think that we fully have come to understand what the impact of AI will be. We used to have to worry about bad guys with black hats, and now we have to worry about computers that might be smarter than us. So the threat landscape is essentially a growing thing, but payments, information, and the management of sensitive documentation is, of course, at the center of all of it.
I would imagine you've got large payments and to subcontractors and confidential information related to bids that is really important to protect. Lori, how about over to you? What are the cyber threats facing the university?
Well, along the same lines of what Michael was saying, AI is changing the sophistication of the threats that are coming at our organization and the volume. So our higher education, we commonly face threats such as phishing, ransomware, data breaches targeting our sensitive student information and our research information. But what's becoming a bigger priority for me right now, or along the same lines, I guess, would be insider threat. Especially in this era of AI, the accidental disclosure of sensitive information is something that does keep me up at night.
Yeah, so it couldn't even be intentional, right? I mean, an insider threat, it could just be a mistake. You're opening
Well, yeah,
up the
you would
setting.
think about your employees. They're intrigued by AI,
Right.
and they're seeing how AI can simplify their work, but they're using it not knowing, or it's important to provide the education, but not realizing that that data that they're putting in there is going out into the public domain, and it's being used to train other tools. So IP, sensitive information, protected information, education of our employees, having the tools that are monitoring what's going into those third-party AI tools is critical right now.
All right. Well, thank you. We'll dig into AI a little bit deeper as we go along here. But Megan, what's facing the healthcare industry?
Yeah, so I echo all of the same sentiments as my other panelists. Healthcare as a whole has seen a 600% increase in cyber events since COVID. So that sort of as a whole for the landscape, it tells us that the bad actors want the gold data, which is your medical data, which is also encompassing of your financial data because there's billing involved. So the health centers that we serve, they see phishing, they see business email compromise, and they see ransomware. And smaller organizations are especially vulnerable because the attackers know that they often will have limited IT staff or limited bandwidth. So to prepare for that, we emphasize layered defenses that we will get into later in the presentation. But healthcare, we had an attack on a health center right in Connecticut early last year, and the attackers had been in the system for 4 months before they made their move. So it just goes to show you, and that's a very advanced and sophisticated health center in the state. So, if they're breaching that level, what defenses do the smaller health centers have?
Yeah, and that really emphasizes the example that you gave there, the importance for the detective and response controls to look for unusual behavior. So, because once somebody's in, they can do lots of damage by turning off, the backup systems, exfiltrating data, and so that's that detective and response. It's not just have a hard shell and a gooey middle. You got to be hard all the way around, like you were talking about with layered defenses. So, Amy, on the financial services side in the banking environment, what are the common threats that you're faced with?
Yep, the threats that we see most basically revolve around human error. So whether it be a customer getting a text trying to say, hey, we sent you a code, can you please let us know what that code is? We're trying to get into your account and make changes. Or as the employees get phishing emails, false invoices, different things, the human error tends to be the largest for us and the hardest to combat, just because it is something that humans in general, we forget, we get tired, we just have an issue to where we forget when we have the email come in and didn't check to make sure that the link was safe. So we try to combat this with a lot of training, both on the customer and on the employee side. The customer training, the American Bankers Association has a program called Banks Never Ask That. So we try to roll out those campaigns to customers so they're getting a consistent message regardless of which bank that they're talking to. But basically a lot of training and trying to make sure that employees are also, if there was a request that came in, they're validating with some sort of means that's not publicly available back to the customer to make sure we're talking to the actual person and not an AI fake.
That's great. You bring up an interesting perspective because it's not only the training of your employees, but training of your customers. And because really security is, especially if they're doing online banking, a shared responsibility between your customers responsible for not getting duped, and then the employees have also got to be vigilant. So that's interesting. To start off with asking Amy, you'd mentioned earlier that you get audited frequently by regulators. What's your strategy for complying with the regulatory requirements?
Good question. So technically with regulation, you have to read the regulation to understand what it says. We also have a subscription that helps us stay alert to regulatory changes as they occur. We have risk assessment software that we utilize to conduct risk assessments on each of the regulations or the handbooks provided by FFIEC to ensure that we have proper coverage on each item or that we address any gaps that we find. We also have a sound vendor management program that's not just contract management. So with that, we monitor our vendors utilizing a risk-based approach and perform regular due diligence to ensure our vendors are staying on top of the regulatory requirements and have safeguards and audits in place to ensure compliance, since we're responsible and held accountable to what our vendors are doing on our behalf.
Yeah, that's great. I would imagine that, for certain vendors, they're more critical than others, right? That if you're sharing maybe perhaps customer information with them. It's essential that they have the appropriate controls in place. So Amy,
Yes, it is.
are you, from a regulator perspective, do you find the regulators are helpful with really staying on top of the most current threats?
So basically, no, I would say regulators are not helpful with staying on top of emerging threats, and regulatory expectations tend to lag the current threat environment. Regulations are typically reactive in nature. So the regulations are developed in response to either past incidents or failures and are designed to be deliberate and are not necessarily built for speed. The threats are ever evolving, as is technology, and so I assume it's hard for them to keep up, just like it is kind of for us. So this is why regulatory agencies look for a risk-based approach for your organization to stay on top of those emerging threats. It seems like the regulatory agencies will not specifically help you to stay on top of those emerging threats, but they will review your security program to ensure you're practicing sound security principles and using a risk-based approach in your implementation. At our organization, we utilize a few things to help us stay on top of those. We utilize various threat intelligence sources to assess the emerging threats as they're happening. We assess our security controls against a cyber kill chain framework to ensure we have proper coverage at each level or step to satisfy our level of risk tolerance. And then we contract with a third-party cybersecurity monitoring service that actively monitors all of our high and critical vendors' cyber health, as well as our own. They monitor that in real time, and we receive alerts when there's changes to whether it's our health or whether it's our vendors. Sometimes implementation of a patch may introduce a new vulnerability, and as you know, patches are distributed very, very often. So it's important for us to stay on top of that and have that cybersecurity monitoring service.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. Amy, how do you engage your board of directors in communicating cyber threats, and then how you do a lot around risk management? You mentioned that a few times already. How do you communicate risk to your board of directors?
Yeah, we basically engage in cybersecurity and risk management discussion with the board through different sources. So IT maintains a strategic plan that's updated annually. The strategic plan details the specific needs and focus IT has planned for the next 2 to 3 years or more. We've also created an IT risk register that provides a report of what IT is focusing on in regards to resource and time investment. So we've kind of decided what is that minimum amount of time, and then we will track it on the risk register accordingly, or if the risk tends to be high. The register aligns the business need for each item being completed and how it aligns with that strategic plan and the level of risk around it. So it kind of is a one source of truth for what we're working on and what we're seeing. So we also have any audit findings or work necessary due to increased threat activity. They're incorporated into that risk register so that we can adjust the priority as necessary and can help explain why priorities have changed or if changes were required. We also provide a high-level roadmap of IT's focus based on that strategic plan and risk register. It gives a high-level summary of IT's priorities and focus quarter by quarter for about a 2-year time frame. And we revisit that roadmap about every 6 months to discuss changes and what potentially happened. So there are times that that roadmap has slipped because we have had threats come in that we've had to deal with, and that's taken IT's time. So having that risk register, having that detail has helped explain to the board why we have slipped in some of the timelines and the necessity of why we allowed to change priority. Our Chief Information Officer also speaks with the board on a regular basis or as they request based on, hey, you provided this high-level report, we have questions, do you mind coming in and talking to us about it? And then we also push out training regularly to employees, customers, the board. So IT will come and talk to the board when we are doing that training and talk about the different threats and things, why we are choosing the training we are at that particular time.
have you done to increase the knowledge of board members around cybersecurity and make sure that they're engaged? I know that for a lot of financial institutions years ago, it was a lot about approving loans and business decisions, and cyber really wasn't 10 years ago as important as it is now. Did you have to do some education at the board level to bring them up to speed?
Yeah, we do regular cybersecurity training with the board and talk to them on a regular basis about some of the different threat intelligence sources we have. Those sources provide excellent resources, as has Whipley in the past, that we can share with the board to help get them caught up and into a speed. And we're fortunate as a board, we have several members that are very familiar with cybersecurity from their own organizations. So they're not only getting training from us, they're getting training from their own organization as well. So that's been super helpful.
Great, thank you for sharing that. You'd mentioned that you're providing resources and support to the health centers and specifically the federally qualified health centers. What are the primary challenges that you see that the federally qualified health centers having related to cyber?
So the first challenge is resource limitations. Community health centers run so lean all of the time, whether it's during good funding times or times like this where funding is uncertain. And many can't afford dedicated cybersecurity staff. So they'll often have their IT department that is monitoring to the best of their ability, or they are outsourcing portions of their monitoring. But as far as moving the needle on increasing their vulnerability posture, it hasn't always been top of the priority. And line items in budgets are often very small for IT in general, which encompasses cybersecurity by default. Vendor complexity is another challenge. So our health centers use so many vendors, starting with their electronic health records. So that's like your Epic or your eClinicalWorks. Everybody has to have one of those. Different billing systems, different data exchanges. So there are all of these BAAs that are in place. And one of the things that we had developed or that we had noticed over time, and it was really highlighted during the United Healthcare / Change Healthcare attack also last year, when we had 2 of our health centers significantly impacted on a downstream effect from it. 2, 3, 4 layers down, right? So the impact was 4 layers above the actual vendor that they were using that was impacted. And they were impacted from February to May with labs and claims. Claims that's how they get paid. So the vendor complexity is a big piece of this. So we're sitting here talking about AI and all of these new vendors sort of coming in from everywhere, offering new solutions. But what we said was we need to look at our current vendors and ensure that they are taking the steps necessary to protect their systems so that by default it protects us. Regulatory change is also another piece to that. Federally qualified community health centers, because they are federally funded, they are beholden to the federal government in a number of different ways. One of those ways being regular regulatory reviews. And while cybersecurity has not in the past been a line item in those reviews in and of itself, it is sort of baked into emergency management, and reviewers are starting to want to see, do you have incident response policies in place? Have you tested your policies? Have your staff been trained? And then, but circling it right back to resource limitations in times like this where the government is shut down while they're not necessarily impacted from their funding streams, like you said in the beginning of this call, ancillary support from the federal government that they receive is impacted. So it's not that they don't care about security, It's that they're just really stretched thin all of the time. And they need support in translating best practices into daily operations. And that's where the HCCN comes in.
Well, can you talk a little bit more about the HCCN? I know that you're providing as an association and as HCCN, you're providing support and resources. Can you explain what those are?
So absolutely, as we have emerged from COVID, we started to take a look at a lot of different landscapes, the health information technology landscapes. And one of the areas that kept bubbling up to the top, whether it was from our board and requests from our CEOs, or whether it was requests directly from the staff that we work with, was cybersecurity was becoming more and more of a need. The Change Healthcare attack helped to highlight that. The health center that was impacted earlier this year also helped to underscore that there was a real need here, and that because the resources are stretched so thin, the HCCN could come in and provide a significant investment to help really move the needle on some of the items of vulnerability facing our health centers. So we built this multi-layered, we call it the three-legged stool, because we realized that without training and education for the IT departments and those responsible at the health center level for monitoring their cybersecurity posture, if it's not outsourced especially, they need training and education, and that comes in a couple of different ways. That comes from webinars and one-off meetings. It's baked into peer groups that we host with all of our health center staff on a regular basis. Then the second leg of that stool is we've contracted with a company to come in and do real tangible assessments of individual health centers' security postures, which leads to a roadmap that tells them, here's where you need to start, here's your order of severity. And then we provide support, direct financial support for those health centers to tackle some of those items on their roadmap. And then the third leg of the stool, which inevitably leads into really the overarching goal of the whole program, is to ensure that our health centers have the sufficient level of cybersecurity insurance coverage for the cheapest possible cost, right? Like that's at the end of the day is trying to save them money and ensure that they are protected. The health center I keep referencing, their event is now at 10 million, so it goes up very quickly. So ensuring that health center leadership, CEOs, CFOs, CIOs, anybody that holds the pocketbook decision making are informed of what cyber insurance best practices there are, that they get a review of their specific policy that they have, even if they don't change, just to be able to understand it better. And really all of those pieces of that stool lay the foundation to sort of level set everyone across the board, no matter the size of the health center. So it provides that equity to them as well. And then, peer learning is really the crux of the whole thing. We have health centers that are far in advance in their cybersecurity posture. We have health centers that just aren't. So hearing from their peers is also where a lot of the magic happens.
So that education, making sure they've got the appropriate type of testing and controls in place, as well as allowing them to get insurance. That seems to be a really powerful service that you're providing to your membership base or to the health centers that are part of the HCCN. What role does insurance play in moving the needle on or with the health centers? I know that over the years, at least the last few years, the insurance and underwriting process has gotten much more prescriptive.
Yes, it absolutely. Yeah, it absolutely has, and we've seen health centers have a hard time even getting underwritten in the first place, regardless of where their technical controls stand. Or we have health centers whose continuously their premiums go up and up and up. So it really became sort of a forcing function of readiness for the health centers. And it was also an area that, you know, when a leader assesses all of the compliance pieces of running a business, you know, cyber's in there. We had a health center who had their cyber policy was just a line item in their general liability policy. So you know that just inherently on that, they do not have the appropriate amount of coverage if they were to have an event. So as we sort of understood that landscape, we really started to push towards helping health centers to really formalize their policies, implement their technical controls, because at the end of the day, it's one thing to have an event, to have a policy in place. It's another thing to ensure that you and all of your technical controls meet the policy so that they don't have any room to deny any part of your claim.
And Lori, I've got a couple questions for you. I mean, you had mentioned that you've got lots of information, whether it's, you know, student records, it's financial records, it's, you know, research and grant records. You know, how do you approach the challenge of, you know, securing Marquette's digital assets and its infrastructure while still supporting the academic freedom of students for them to explore, experiment, and innovate, even with things like AI, as you mentioned previously?
Absolutely. And you know, to understand this industry in higher ed, we have open access because of the research and the academic freedom. So it's a big risk for us. And you think about our user base, they're very trusting. We have 11,500 students that cyber criminals are counting on their naivety, if you will, and so as an organization, from a technology perspective, it's about engineering and architecture. Ultimately, we create spaces that support the academic freedom that the students need, and that space is segmented from our core business processes. We also practice a modified, what's called zero trust. So we practice this modified zero trust approach where we segment, isolate, and provide students with only the access they need to pursue those academic interests. But also from a university perspective, our faculty, we help educate our students on just cyber awareness and to be smart on how to use the tools, not to click when you don't recognize emails, you know, and those phishing attacks that are so frequently coming at our students. Cyber criminals are becoming more and more sophisticated, and AI is helping them to really manipulate and take advantage of students. As an example, we had, it was a couple years ago, but we had an imposter syndrome where a bad actor had stolen the identity of a student, and they sent out an email message as if they were a faculty member and said, I am traveling out of the country. I need an administrative assistant here in the States. I'm going to pay $900 a week. You only need to work 10 hours a week. I'm going to have you do light administrative work, pay some of my invoices. If you're interested, please reach out to me. Please reach out to this specific email address. And of course, it was a different email address. And we did have quite a few students, because $900 a week, who wouldn't be attracted to that? Is that a little bit extreme for 10 hours of work a week? Yes. But we did have a few students that did click, reach out to the bad actor. And the individual, what they did was, I said, I'm going to send you a check for $4,000, but I have these invoices that need to be paid immediately. Do you have a credit card that you can pay these bills with? Of course, the poor student paid the invoices, and of course, the checks bounced. So, bad actors are really targeting those needs of students. So, education along with our architecture and engineering is very important.
The example that you gave, it looked like it came from a trusted source, right? Somebody at the university, and it's great to hear that you're teaching the younger generation on how to be a good digital citizen and how to be cautious. I've got kids, and I know that they tend to be more trusting than I am, and so it's great to
think about social media. Hey, Larry, why is this
Right.
picture? Why did you post this picture? And of course, they click on it,
Yeah.
and now the bad actor is getting into their mobile device. So they're very, very, very trusting, and somewhat naive. But in higher education, it's our job. We educate. So we're in the
So it sounded like you also kind of segment the student records, or the student environment, so they can explore and learn from
Absolutely.
the information that's on the academic side of things, the administration side of things. Can you speak a little bit about just really what keeps you up at night? What would be the worst breach scenario, or the things that really scare you?
Well, the things that really AI and what individuals, as I've mentioned before, what folks are putting into those the third-party large language models is and that data loss is a threat. We are establishing good practices, governance, controls, monitoring, and creating awareness with our end users. That insider threat that I believe Amy was talking about, that is also an area that keeps me up at night, whether it's accidental or purposeful. That would do damage to our reputation, our brand. So we maintain a balance of insider threat monitoring, data loss prevention, user behavior analytics, and detection and response capabilities to manage the risk. So I can get a little bit of sleep at night. But you think about the ransomware attacks. If I had insider threat and ransomware, both are equally concerning, and that insider threat paired with ransomware would be devastating for our organization. We've invested heavily in third parties to help us monitor our environment and help us with our detection and response capabilities. We use threat intelligence centers and tools to help us understand what's coming at our environment, what's happening in the industry, so that we can try to stay a step ahead. As you build a 5-story house, the cyber criminals are building a 6-story ladder.
Right. Good analogy. Okay, Michael, in the construction industry, especially when you're working with companies that are in the public sector, how important are the cybersecurity controls when you're bidding on new business?
Well, it's essential, excuse me, and it's at the core of the problem, because by the nature of the bidding, there's a tremendous amount of collaborative information that has to go back and forth. We have to find tremendous detail about the project itself, about the pricing of products, about the insurance models. All these things are there, and cybersecurity is absolutely essential, because if you lose control of that information, you will potentially run legal risk, but you'll also possibly impact your business. And at the point where we are right now in shifting technologies, we're very worried, because our new technology is centered around a lakehouse, Microsoft Fabric, and is centered around AI as being the front end for all of our users. So we're using things like Autodesk and Sage, and where those things are coming up with AI. And we're going to talk more about that, and I'm going to be a real downer. We are doing all of the things we're supposed to do based on legacy technology, with the concept that there are bad guys who are humans who may or may not be smarter than we are, doing things, and that we can use third-party entities to monitor threats because there's enough time for them to monitor the threats, build us a strategy or a guardrail for us, and move on. The risk that when we're talking about not sleeping at night, 2 weeks ago, OpenAI announced connectors into Microsoft Fabric, Microsoft Office, SharePoint, Google Docs, everything. Your users, unless you are aware that you have those openings, are about to connect to internal data with their AIs. This just happened 2 weeks ago. Last week, they announced that they are going to connect applications into AI. So where before we had time and we had methodologies that many bad guys used methodologies, they came up with new ones, people documented the new ones, we had time to respond. We're in a different place right now with that. And when we do try and think about everybody coming from legacy models, the legacy models don't work in the new universe. And we have a lot of learning. You're talking about education. What comes before education is learning. First, we have to understand the threat. And my fear is that AI is not being used by bad guys just to do this, but AI is capable of doing bad things that aren't being driven by bad guys, that are being driven by our own people. If you go in and say, make this analysis for me, it's going to find things that, unless you protect them, is wide open to them. So that and encryption, I'm going to say one other nasty word called quantum computing. You guys realize that encryption, which is at the root of almost all of the security that we have this belief that Bitcoin, for instance, is secure because of an encryption that would take the life of the universe to decode. In 2 years or 3 years, when somebody builds a real quantum computer, encryption is going to be gone. What are we going to do if we build cybersecurity based on traditional methods and encryption, if the technology is going to beat us to death ahead of us? So, those are the kind of things that we have to worry about. So we're doing the traditional things, but we're very, very concerned, and we're very much trying to understand, almost drinking from a fire hose, what they're throwing at us on a daily basis.
So it really seems like the speed and the velocity of the change is a challenge to make sure that as you're adopting, or even users are adopting, different tools, is staying on top of it, right?
Yeah, and you realize that we are now talking about McKinsey fired half their workforce and is going to replace them by AI assistants. Right. We're actually going to have users that aren't people. We're going to have users that are AIs that are using our systems. You could say, go log into the accounting system and go do this for me. Wow, that seems like a potential threat. All someone has to do is hijack my Michael agent.ui thing, and they're off and running. So we really have to spend some time. We've never had to respond in such a short time. This is a threat to education as well, because when all of you are out there trying to hire people who are AI aware, you're going to discover that no one has a degree yet from a 4-year school or a master's degree or a PhD in this technology, because it didn't exist 8 months ago. We've never had such a short time between creation and adoption, that education and adaptation to the new technology what was an acceptable time period. So that's scary too. And you could actually ask ChatGPT, can you go and hit my company, and can you go probe their security for me? Will you come up with a strategy by which I could break into Marquette? And it'll go, and now there's a thinking mode in ChatGPT that you could pay extra for. And believe it or not, that would probably work. It would probably give you some things that your people hadn't thought of. I guess I just let the cat out of the bag, right?
I think I'm going to
So
do that right after this call.
don't use GPT that way. Forget what I said. Erase the tape.
All right, the follow-up question for you, Michael, was, what role do you see? You'd mentioned how AI is being used by adversaries. What role do you see for the good guys to use agentic technology and AI within your defenses?
It is, and again, forgive me for being a physicist, but it's really based on the geometry of the space-time itself. We've been protecting ourselves from attacks from outside of a wall, a front door. Someone gets in the front door, we give them privileges, we let them go one place or another. It's a topology that is different than the threat. The threat is backdoor and ubiquitous. So we need to start to think about how do we protect the information itself almost to a field level, independent necessarily of front door traditional accesses. So I don't have the answer to this, that there's going to be $1 billion AI thing that says, I'm an AI cybersecurity sheriff, hire me and I'll take care of you. We don't understand the landscape. We don't fully understand the threat. I think our position at our company is going to be that for the lakehouse itself, and I don't know how many of you are moving into Snowflake and Databricks and Fabric, just this idea of information-centric businesses. We have to build a model, which we don't know the answer to yet, that protects that data before we get the utility and the ROI that our financial people want from AI. Because I cannot open such a smorgasbord to the world. I can't open it even to all of my employees. I'm going to have to figure out how to put guardrails in place. And the argument that in Washington with legislation around AI was, how do we protect AI? How do we keep it from doing things that we don't want it to do? And we've already made the decision in the United States that we're not going to do anything for 10 years, because the feeling was that if we restrict AI and other players in the world don't, that they will have the upper hand with us. So this is an issue that is complex along political, mathematical, structural ways, and I think we should all be thinking more about it. Our position is going to be that we want to err on the side of caution and be very, very restrictive in the beginning as we open up these new resources. It's a very bad practice to let Grok and Claude and some of these other guys have access to your data, because they share it out. They make it anonymous, but they share it out. And not only that, they tell you that they're sharing it out. It shouldn't be a surprise to you. I don't see how a healthcare organization or a bank or anybody that has sensitive information would take the risk of doing that. And yet it is very easy for your users to do this unless you almost immediately start to educate the users. You realize that Microsoft has built Copilot into Office, and it suddenly is capable of looking at all the SharePoint documents and and OneDrive, those things, it's capable of looking at it from inside every one of your employees' office tenant. This kind of stuff really requires you to rethink the landscape to the point of maybe I'm talking about being too cocoony for now, but I think we're going to have to figure it out. And the risk you guys, Megan was talking about insurance. I would hate to be a cyber insurance company. You know, I mean, think about, they ask you questions and they give you insurance based on whether or not you're using best practices. And I'm telling you that the best practices are under assault. So you could write a perfectly great insurance policy and then be blown up by something that has not happened yet, or just happened last week. So I don't understand. I realize I'm asking a lot of questions and not giving you a lot of guidance, but I have a lot of questions. So I'm staying up all night with Lori and Megan and Amy. We're all going to stay up all night and worry.
Well,
For all.
it sounds like, as you adapt, you're certainly making sure that you're going to be deploying AI in a responsible way. And so the things that you're doing, like on the data bricks and the data lake side, with getting data structured and you have the appropriate governance over it, reviewing access controls, because like Copilot or an AI is not going to, at least from my perspective, add any additional threat. It's going to get faster exposure to vulnerabilities that already exist. And so,
Right.
From an access control perspective, as long as you kind of button things up, you can deploy, AI, but it has to be done in a responsible manner. Amy, you had mentioned on the regulator side, are the regulators giving any guidance on AI to financial institutions?
Good question. Basically, no. So we've had to develop a structure in the absence of guidance or regulation by checking with peers, so modeling what they're doing, reading recommendations from audit partners such as yourself, Whipley, attending webinars on AI. And then we, from that of what we're reading and seeing, we developed a risk assessment that we use internally to kind of gauge the landscape for AI and what we need to do. Implemented a oversight committee. We implemented a policy. We have a lot of different steps we have taken to make sure that we are trying to protect ourselves from all of the potential issues with AI. And so far, it seems to be okay, but we'll see. I mean, we're only a few months into this whole process.
Doing that risk assessment, I think, is a really good first step, right? Having policy, having training, understanding the risks and what are the mitigation options. So a lot of the process that you've put into building your security program, can apply here. Lori, could you share, where you're at in your AI journey and any specific use cases that you're utilizing at Marquette?
You bet. And just to follow up on some things that Michael said, and Amy as well, this is a team sport right now. We're all in the same, trying to figure out this thing called AI. And as Amy said, we need to rely on our partners, and we need to rely on organizations like Whipley to help us even ask the questions we don't know what to ask yet. And with Michael talking about Claude and Copilot, what also worries me is the tools out there that are adding AI to their offering that we don't quite know about yet. And in that end user license agreement, what does it say? How is our data being used? So that kind of keeps me up at night a little bit, is those third-party tools, because everybody's interested in this thing called AI, and they're looking to deploy it into their offerings in order to make their tools more robust. But anyways, what's going on here at Marquette? Academic and administrative teams are exploring how AI can enhance teaching, learning, and operational efficiency. But we're kind of taking a moderated approach where we're looking at innovation and governance and marrying them together. Kind of, it's because of the risk of AI, we are slow and steady. So we've put together a task force broken up by teaching and learning, research, administrative operations, and looking at policies, procedures, tools, the ethics behind the tools, and what are those use cases that we would like to invest in. Because and putting together a portfolio of those use cases so that we can have some sort of organized approach on how we're moving forward. Otherwise, we have folks that might be using AI to do grading, and they're not de-identifying information, and that's going out into a public domain. So we're looking at those use cases, we're prioritizing the use cases, and we're going to be implementing appropriately. Some of the use cases, we've got some agents that are we're piloting with our help desk, agents that we're using to book medical appointments with our dental school, and we're going to look at interfacing the agent with our health records. And if you're coming in for a dental appointment, but you've had your knee replaced, it's going to send a reminder, have you taken your antibiotics an hour before your appointment? So there's some things that we have in the works, but as far as full deployments, not quite yet. But where we are having a strong focus at this point in time is preparing our students for an AI-driven world. I'm sure you can imagine, and you're probably experiencing it with your own kids, is that students are using AI to cheat. They're using AI, oh, you know what? I've got these 10 questions I have to answer tonight. I'm just going to pop the question into AI, and out comes the answer. I'm going to have AI write the paper for me. So many of our colleges were focusing on AI literacy and what the tool is there for. So not to, we want our students to represent their authentic self and use AI as a thought partner, not necessarily as we don't want them to use it to do their work for them. And we're doubling down on that ethical, societal, and professional implications of AI. So when our students do leave here, that they are educated, they know how to use AI responsibly, that they can leverage it to do great things, not to replace who they are, their work, how they communicate in their authentic voice. So it's a challenge, but education, that's what we should be educating on. And that's where we're doubling down.
That's fantastic. That's very similar, teaching responsible use, ethical use of AI, preparing them for the work ahead is fantastic. It's very similar to what you were saying about the training that you're providing to students to be good digital citizens. So that's great to hear. Megan, on the insurance side, I know that Dr. Bodner had brought up that he'd hate to be in the insurance world in the AI environment. Are you starting to see as AI factoring into any of the insurance questionnaires to get it specifically cybersecurity insurance?
We haven't necessarily seen that yet. I think that's undoubtedly coming. I think lack of regulatory, to Dr. Bodner's point, lack of regulatory anything is a struggle. So no, we're not seeing AI preventing or helping in any way related to insurance. But similarly, we're preparing for it. So ensuring that health centers have governance in place, policies in place, a policy more than one that just says thou shalt not enter PHI into ChatGPT. Really thoughtful and responsible policies in place, which then in turn translates to staff training. And we have a couple of health centers who are advanced in this area, and they're actually gatekeeping the use of AI until a staff member goes through a training program on whatever authorized AI platform that they are part of. But it's also becoming a workforce recruitment and retention sticking point, because to recruit providers who have worked at larger hospital systems or other practices that have ambient listening tools, that have other scribing tools that really helps lessen their administrative time. If a health center wants to recruit them, oftentimes that's a deal breaker if they don't have that in place. So the health centers are being forced to advance as rapidly as their wealthier counterparts in the industry, and that's difficult and tough to keep up with sort of as a whole. So that's where the HCCN comes in. We continue to monitor all of that. We are helping them with an AI vendor decision-making matrix. So as they're vetting vendors that are coming in from all sides, they can say, ask the questions that they don't know, like we've all been talking about, the questions we don't know to ask yet.
Right.
So we're getting started on doing some of that work for them, but it's changing at a rapid pace. And I echo Dr. Bodner and Lori and Amy. We're all in the same boat here,
Right.
Staying up at night worrying about the vast AI implications, and to Lori's point about just the atrophy of the self of the people that we work with. You don't want doctors using AI to make your diagnosis all the time. You want them to use their skills to do that. So I think there's a lot to come on this front.
Well, we've got a bunch of questions here. So Tom, if you can, I know that we don't have time probably to get to all of them, but if you can.
Yeah, this AI topic has really resonated with the audience too here from a security perspective, and I think the tenor of the questions is around risk assessment. So maybe just a couple of questions to dig in there. As you think about how your users can just go out and start consuming AI, without IT's intervention to make this happen, and especially Michael, with the things you were mentioning about, the new connectors that are coming online and being available. How can you make sure that your security team is part of the discussion here, and able to be part of that checkpoint to make sure that the business isn't going out or your operations team isn't going out and bringing in additional AI-driven risk? How are you approaching that?
I'd like to tell you that we're going to do it the traditional way with governance and policies. We're trying to stop note taking, automatic note taking in businesses. We're thinking of limiting people wearing note taking appliances. We literally by saying which AI tools you can use and can't use, by limiting access in the network. We use Azure virtual desktops, so we have a controlled environment for our users, so we can exert some very heavy duty governance on that side. But the risk of letting the consumer driven public, your users, your students, all of that, log into a website, get a new tool, plug it in and say, write me this paper. That's one thing, but go to the library and look this up and, all of these other things. Agents are very scary. We don't think we should let everybody use agents, even though they're selling the idea. So it's governance, it's policy, it's as serious as violating any other corporate policy. If you do something that we tell you not to, the onus on us is to discover what we should put on the blacklist. We can't put Microsoft on the blacklist because every single time you open your email, it says, do you want me to help you write this email better? Or you open a Word document, it says, summarize the document for an executive. I'm worried that our children's generation won't be able to write an essay or a report. They won't even write Excel. They'll ask the AI to build them an Excel sheet or a bar graph and then summarize it to an executive that will get sung with country music, with, Taylor Swift singing it, but we're our talented people who are doing what they think is the right thing. We may be the last generation that benefits from it helping with our experience, but when Laurie says that the kids in school that are cheating, who are they cheating? They're not cheating the school.
Themselves.
They're cheating themselves and their employers and their families. I mean, how many of you can still do a long division, or even know what a slide rule is? There are things that go away with the generations. I don't want to see our people become less capable because we become lazy and use technology. So, that represents a risk too, but managing it at the corporate level, we're going to have to get very serious. Even if the government doesn't want to put guide rails in, we have to put guide rails in, and we have to really start getting very serious about just saying no. I remember, was it Nancy Reagan who did that? Just say no, and we have to almost weekly say, these things happen in AI, don't do this. And we've already had fights with our people over this, who want to use something that we feel is unsafe. So it's going to be.
We've got probably 2 minutes for one more question if we've got.
One more question. We've got a attendee here from a regulated industry that's wondering if anybody can share any specifics around a risk assessment methodology for evaluating AI technologies.
Why don't we follow? We can probably follow up with that one.
Yeah.
Did you have something, Michael?
No, I think that's a very great question. I would like to see that as well. That's what we're all waiting for. We're waiting for that.
I think we're a little bit building the plane as we fly it right now.
Exactly. We really are.
That's right. Yeah, I'm going to go ask ChatGPT.
It is a kind of a work in process, but we've been utilizing, IT risk assessments and the risk assessments that we're utilizing for IT and applying it to AI, but there are different risks, right? There are different risks as it relates to privacy, input, output, hallucinations, all kinds of different risks that AI could introduce, but, understanding what those risks are, what are the controls, and then how are they mitigated? So we can have that conversation, or maybe that would be a good follow-up conversation to this. I know that we had a lot of people on the call. We didn't get to all of the questions. If your question wasn't answered, we will follow up with you and answer that. But we have a promise to complete this by 12:15. So as we wrap up, I just wanted to mention that for those who have met the requirements for CPE, your certificates will be mailed to you in the next 14 days. It'll be coming from training@whipfly.com, so keep an eye on that. And then also a reminder that we'll be having the third part of our webinar series, which is part of our uncertainty campaign. The next session is going to be on From Defense to Offense, CFO Tactics for Uncertain Markets. So register and join us on November 13th. You can scan that QR code on the screen or use the link dropped into the chat to register. I wanted to thank you all for your time. The panelists, you were fantastic. It was lots of great discussion. We could have had another hour or two easily. Thank you for giving us your insights and your wisdom in these areas. And also wanted to thank the attendees for this. So have a great day, and hopefully this will help you be more cyber risk ready. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.